Hi everyone, welcome back to Ajay Automates channel. I hope you are all doing good. If you are preparing for a Playwright automation interview and wondering what questions companies actually ask, then you are in the right place. In this video, we are going to share the top 60 Playwright automation interview questions collected from real automation interviews conducted over the last 2 years. Okay, and it includes feedback from more than 50 Playwright interview experiences from our very own Ajay Automates training candidates as well. And whether you are targeting an MNC company or product based company or a startup, these are the questions you should be confident answering before your interview. So if we'll cover everything from Playwright fundamentals and framework concepts to locators, API testing using Playwright framework, network mocking, debugging, scenario based questions, the most frequently asked JavaScript programming related questions as well. So if you want to maximize your interview preparation and walk into your next interview with more confidence, please watch this video till the end. It will be definitely useful in your Playwright automation interview. So let's get started. Before we jump into the interview questions, it's very important to have a strong understanding of the Playwright fundamentals. So you should know what Playwright is, why the industry is gradually adopting Playwright alongside Selenium, and how the Playwright architecture works. So Playwright, as you know, most of you know, it's an open source automation framework developed by Microsoft that supports multiple programming languages such as TypeScript, JavaScript, Java, Python, and C#. So it also supports all major browsers like Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit. So compared to Selenium, Playwright provides several modern capabilities such as auto waiting, browser context, storage state management, network interception, screenshots, videos, and reliable locator strategies, which is making it an excellent choice for testing modern web applications. So don't worry if you don't know about these concepts. We will discuss in detail in the interview question and answer section. Okay. So these are some of the major advantages of Playwright. And one of the most frequently asked interview question is, why should we choose Playwright over Selenium? So the answer is that Playwright offers faster test execution compared to Selenium. It eliminates the need for a separate WebDriver. In Selenium we use WebDriver. In Playwright we don't have to use any driver like WebDriver. And Playwright supports built-in parallel execution as well. It handles dynamic web elements more reliably through auto waiting and provides powerful features for testing complex application. Okay, this is why we choose Playwright over Selenium. And please to understand how Playwright architecture works. It's very important. Okay, in Playwright we first write the automation script using Playwright commands. Then the Playwright library sends these commands directly to the browser. Okay, where it finds the web elements and performs the required actions like clicking, typing, or sending values or validating the forms. These actions will be performed. Okay, since Playwright communicates directly with the browser, as I said, we do not need a WebDriver here. Without using a WebDriver, test execution is much faster and more reliable. Okay, so this is how Playwright works, about the Playwright architecture. So please do know about the fundamentals before jumping deep into the more advanced interview questions. Okay, so let's start with the interview question and answers. So the first question is, if I give you a new automation project today, would you choose Selenium or Playwright? How would you decide? So that's a very common interview question nowadays. So my answer would be, it completely depends on the project requirements here. Okay, this is a tricky question. So you can answer like this. If I am starting a brand new web automation project with modern browsers and there are no legacy constraints, we can definitely choose Playwright. Okay, without any doubt we can choose Playwright in this case, because Playwright comes with features like auto waiting, faster test execution, parallel execution, and excellent cross-browser support. Okay, because of these features we can build a stable and maintainable automation framework with less effort. So however, if the company already has a large Selenium framework or needs to support older browsers like Internet Explorer, I wouldn't recommend migrating immediately. In that case, Selenium is still a good choice. So the key point here is, don't choose a tool just because it's new. Choose the tool that best fits the project technical and business requirements. Okay, let's see the next question. Why is Playwright faster than Selenium? So Playwright is generally faster because it communicates directly with the browser using native browser automation protocols. Selenium, on the other hand, communicates through a WebDriver layer before reaching the browser. Okay. Playwright also has built-in auto waiting, so we don't have to write many explicit wait commands. Another advantage is that parallel execution is supported and it allowing multiple tests to run simultaneously in Playwright. Okay, because of these features, Playwright usually executes tests faster and with better stability. Okay, so let's see the next question. How did you configure Playwright? What software is required? So setting up Playwright is quite simple. First, we need to install Node.js because Playwright runs on Node.js. Then we can create a Playwright project by running the command npm init playwright at latest. So this command creates the project structure, installs the required packages, and generates the configuration file. Okay, then we can run the command npx playwright install. So this downloads the supported browser binaries as well. Okay, so apart from node.js, we normally use VS Code as the IDE. So in real projects, we also use Git for version control, CI/CD tool like Jenkins or GitHub Actions. Okay, these are the softwares required for Playwright automation. And this is how we configure Playwright. So the next question is, how does Playwright communicate with the browser? So this is one of the biggest differences between Playwright and Selenium. Playwright communicates directly with the browser using its native automation protocols. For Chromium, it uses the Chrome DevTools protocols, while Firefox and WebKit uses their own browser protocols. Okay, so unlike Selenium, Playwright doesn't need a separate WebDriver executable. Because of this direct communication, test execution is much faster and more reliable. Okay, so the next question is, what is auto waiting in Playwright? So auto waiting is one of Playwright's best features. So whenever we perform an action like clicking a button or entering text, Playwright automatically waits until the element is ready. So it checks whether the element is visible, enabled, stable, and ready to receive user interaction before performing the action. Okay, so this reduces flaky tests and eliminates the need for many manual waits that we commonly write in Selenium. In Selenium, we write a lot of explicit waits, right? We can avoid this in Playwright because Playwright has auto waiting feature. Okay, and the follow-up question for this question is, okay, Playwright has auto waiting, then why are we still using wait in some cases? That's a very good follow-up interview question. Okay, auto waiting works very well for UI actions like clicking buttons or typing into text boxes and few other cases as well. But sometimes we need to wait for application specific events. For example, we may need to wait for an API response to be received, a page navigation, a file download, URL changes, or loading spinner to disappear. So these cases, auto waiting might not work. So in these situations, we use methods like wait for response, wait for URL, or playwright assertions. So auto waiting handles most UI interactions, but explicit waits are still required in certain scenarios. Okay, this is a very important follow-up question for auto waiting. So next question is, what are the limitations of Playwright? Although Playwright is a powerful automation tool, it does have a few limitations. First, it doesn't support Internet Explorer, so it's not suitable for applications that still require IE testing. Second, Playwright downloads browser binaries, which increases the project size. Also, if a company already has a large Selenium framework, migrating to Playwright requires time and effort. Finally, while Playwright's community is growing rapidly, Selenium still has a larger ecosystem because it has been around for many years. Okay, so these are some of the limitations of Playwright. So let's see the next question. What locators do you use in Playwright? So in Playwright, I mostly use the built-in locators, okay, such as get by role, get by text, and get by label. So these locators are recommended because they are reliable and work well with Playwright's auto waiting feature. So I also use CSS selectors, XPath whenever needed. XPath is also supported too, but I generally avoid it unless there is no better option, because long XPath expressions can become difficult to maintain. Okay, so I'll always prefer these recommended locators: get by role, get by text, and get by label. If these are not able to find those web elements, you can go for CSS selector XPath. Okay, so the next question is, which locator do you prefer and why? So this is a follow-up question to previous question. My first preference is Playwright built-in locators like get by role, get by label, and get by text. The reason is they are based on how users interact with the application, making tests more reliable and stable. They also work seamlessly with Playwright's auto-wait features, reducing flaky tests. Okay, so if these locators aren't suitable for particular element, then we can go for CSS selector or XPath as a last option. Okay, so before we move on to the next question, let me tell you about something that can really help you with your interview preparation. If you are looking for structured interview preparation, you can purchase our interview prep booklets, which contains important interview topics gathered from 4+ years of our interview experience and from our very own automation experience as well. So these booklets cover almost everything you need for automation testing, interview preparation. Okay, it includes skill sets like Playwright, JavaScripting, TypeScripting, Selenium Java, coding problems, ask frequently interviews, API testing related questions, API automation related questions, manual and agile related questions. Okay, so these questions are gathered from real interview experiences for the last 4+ years. So you'll be preparing with practical questions that are commonly asked in interviews. So along with these interview preparation booklets, you will also receive framework source code, sample automation projects, and interview preparation videos as well. This will be definitely helpful for your interview preparation and to clear your automation interview. So if you are preparing for automation tester roles, SDET interviews, these resources can save you a lot of preparation time. Okay, if you are interested, you can definitely call or WhatsApp to the number displayed on the screen and we will share further details with you. So now let's continue with the next interview question. What is the difference between browser context, and page in Playwright? So let's understand this with a simple example. Think of browser as the actual Chrome or Firefox application which gets launched. Okay, inside that browser we can create multiple browser contexts. A browser context is like opening a new incognito window. Each context has its own cookies, local storage, and session. So they are completely isolated from each other. So inside every browser context, we create one or more pages, and each page represents a browser tab where we perform our automation like clicking buttons or entering text or validating forms, etc. So remember it like this: browser to browser context to page. Okay, that's the hierarchy used in Playwright. It's an important interview question. Okay, let's see the next one. If you are asked to design a Playwright framework from scratch, what key components would you include? If you are an experienced Playwright automation candidate, you have to be well prepared in framework related questions. Okay, so if I were designing a Playwright framework from scratch, my focus would be on making it reusable, maintainable, and scalable. Okay, first I would use page object model to separate page locators and business methods from the test scripts. I'll use design pattern, page object model design pattern. Then I would configure browser settings, retries, timeouts, and parallel executions, the playwright.config.ts file. For test data, I would avoid hard coding values and instead store them in JSON or Excel or environment files. I would use fixtures for common setup like browser launch and login, create utility classes for reusable methods, and configure HTML reporting as well. Okay, by default Playwright supports HTML reporting. You don't have to configure, but you can talk about it. And capture screenshots for file tests, and integrate the framework with Git and Jenkins for CI/CD. So overall, the goal is to build a framework that's easy to maintain as the project goes. So if you are asked to design a Playwright framework from scratch, these are the key components you should talk in the interview. Okay. So let's see the next question. Explain about your Playwright automation framework. As you know, it's a very important interview question. So you can explain like this. Okay, in my project, we use a Playwright framework built with TypeScript. So if you are using any other programming language, you can talk about it, Java or Python. Okay, so we use a Playwright framework built with JavaScript, TypeScript, and we use page object model as the design pattern. All page locators and business methods are maintained in separate object classes, which keeps our test scripts clean and reusable. Okay, we manage browser settings, auto retries, timeouts, parallel execution through the playwright.config.ts file. So for login, we use storage state, so users don't need to log in before every test, which saves large number of execution time. Okay, talk about fixtures also. We also use fixtures for common setup, HTML reports for execution results, capturing test execution results, screenshots for failed tests, and we are using Git for version control. And we can talk about CI/CD platform as well, Jenkins or Bamboo for CI/CD test execution. Okay, so overall the framework should be modular, scalar, and easy to maintain. So please do talk about these components. Okay, if you are using any AI plugin also along with your framework, you can talk about it. So we are using AI plugins like Cloud Code for faster test script generation, for optimization, etc. Okay, very important interview question. Please do prepare this thoroughly. Explain the usage of playwright.config.ts file. The playwright.config.ts file is the central configuration file in your Playwright automation framework. Okay, instead of configuring settings in every test scripts, we keep all common configurations in this one file. For example, we configure the browser type, page URL, execution timeout, retries, parallel execution, screenshots, videos, trace settings, reporting, number of workers, everything in this config file. We also define browser projects like Chromium, Firefox, WebKit for cross-browser testing. So whenever we need to update a configuration, we do it in one place. Okay, this is the file, this makes the framework much easier to maintain. Okay. So how do you manage test data? So in our framework, we manage test data using Excel files and environment files. The .env file stores environment specific and sensitive information like application URLs, usernames and passwords, and API tokens. So for functional test data such as customer information or product details, different input values, we use Excel files. During execution, utility methods reads the required data from Excel, making it easy to perform data-driven testing without changing the automation scripts. Okay, so if you are taking test data from any other files also, you can talk about it. So most of the projects maintain application related data in Excel files and configuration related data like URL, username, password in .env files. Okay. Next question is, how do you generate and review test reports? In our project, we use Playwright's built-in HTML reports, so we feel it's more than enough. Okay, and the UI is good. After execution, the report is generated automatically. So we review the report to check which test cases are passed, failed, test execution time, and any captured screenshots as well. If a test fails, I use the trace viewer along with the report to understand exactly what happened during execution. So this makes debugging much faster and helps identify the root cause of failures. So don't just answer like we use only Playwright built-in HTML reports. Talk about what will you do when test case fails also. Okay. The next question is, can Playwright perform API testing? If so, how? Yes, Playwright supports API testing as well. It provides a built-in API request context, so we don't need a separate library for basic API automation Playwright provides a built-in API request context library for API validations. So using this, we can perform HTTP operations like get, post, put, patch and delete. After sending the request, we validate the status code, response body, response headers and the other required fields using Playwright assertions. So one advantage is that we can perform both UI testing and API testing with the same Playwright framework. Okay, very important question. Next question is, how do you validate response body? Okay, the follow-up questions for API testing. After sending the API request, we can capture the response and convert it into JSON using the response.json method. Then we can validate the required fields using Playwright's expect assertions. For example, I verify the response status or message or IDs, names or any business logic specific values based on the API requirement. This ensures that API is returning the expected data. So do not miss to talk about the response.json method and assertions here. Okay. Next question is, how do you handle authorization in Playwright API testing? In our project, we mainly use bearer token authentication. First, we obtain the access token either from an authentication API or from environment variables. Then, while creating the API request context, we pass the token in the authorization header. This way, the same token is automatically included in all protected API requests. Also, we never hardcode tokens inside the code. We store them securely in environment files or generate them dynamically during test execution. Okay. So how do you pass the bearer token in Playwright? Okay, it's the follow-up question to the previous one. In Playwright, we can pass bearer token in the authorization header using the format bearer access underscore token. Okay, so while creating the API request context, we configure it using the extra HTTP headers option. So the token is automatically included in all API requests. So an important point, we never hardcode that token in our test scripts. We usually store it in a .env file or generate it dynamically by calling the authentication API before running our automation test. So this makes the framework more secure and easy to maintain. Okay. Next question is, what is network interception in Playwright and why do you use it? Network interception is a feature that allows us to intercept network requests before they reach the server. Okay. So it's a feature that allows us to intercept network requests before they reach the server. Using this feature, we can mark API responses, we can modify requests, we can block unwanted requests or continue requests with changes. So this is very useful when the backend service is unavailable or when we want to test different scenarios without depending on real API responses. Okay. So let's see the next question. Which method do you use for network interception? So in Playwright, we use the page.route method for network interception. So using this method, we can intercept network requests before they reach the server. Inside the route handler, we can continue the request or modify it, mark the responses or even block the request based on our testing need. Okay, so page.route is a method we use for network interception. Let's see the next question. What is the difference between route.continue, route.fulfill and route.abort? So these three methods are used for different purposes. Okay, route.continue sends the request to the actual server and we can modify the request if needed. Whereas route.fulfill doesn't call the server. Instead, it returns a mocked response that we define in the test. And route.abort completely blocks the request, which helps us test how the application behaves when a request fails. So these are the difference between these two methods. Okay. Give me a real-time example where you have used network marking in our project. Okay, so in one of our projects, the order page was ready, but the backend API was still under development. So instead of waiting for the backend team, we marked the API response using route.fulfill. This allowed us to continue UI automation and testing independently, so saving both time and effort. If you have any other cases, you can definitely talk about that particular scenario as well in the interview. Okay, let's see the next question. Your application requires login before every test. So how would you optimize test execution? As you know, most of your test cases will be dependent on login test method. So in Playwright, instead of using login test script in each of your automation tests, instead of that, I would log in only once and save the authenticated session using storage state. So talk about storage state here. So then I would reuse the same session across all the test cases. So this will reduce our test execution time, avoid repeated login steps, and make the test more stable. Okay, so instead of logging in before every test, I would log in once and save the authenticated session using storage state. We can reuse the same session across all our automation test cases. This is a cool feature in Playwright, right? So next question is, how do you debug failed tests? So when a test fails, I first check the Playwright HTML report to identify the failed step. Then we use trace viewer, which shows screenshots, network requests, DOM snapshots, and every action performed during test execution. So if required, we can also review screenshot videos and logs to identify the root cause and fix the issue. Okay. Next question is, how do you automate a customer seller admin workflow? So imagine you are testing an e-commerce app with customer seller and admin users. How would you automate this scenario using Playwright? Okay. Why would you use BrowserContext instead of opening 3 browser windows? This question was asked in recently in many interviews from service-based companies. Okay, so most of the projects having customer seller details, you can expect this question, scenario-based question. Okay, so for this scenario, I would launch one browser and create 3 browser context objects, one for the customer, one for the seller, and one for the admin. So talk about creating 3 browser context objects for customer, seller, and admin. So each browser context has its own session, cookies, and local storage. So all 3 users can stay logged in at the same time. The customer places the order, the seller approves it, and finally the admin verifies the transaction. This approach is efficient and closely matches how real users interact with the application. This is an important scenario-based questions I have put up for customer, seller, admin workflow. It can be asked for any other workflows. Okay, so the follow-up question here is, why not create 3 browser instances instead? We can create 3 browser instances, but it's not the recommended approach. Browser context is lightweight because multiple contexts share the same browser process while keeping user sessions completely isolated. Okay, using multiple browser instances consumes more memory and increases test execution time, whereas browser context provides better performance with the same session isolation. Okay, let's see the next question. How would you reduce test execution from 40 minutes to under 10 minutes? Okay, so you can answer like this. I would enable parallel execution by increasing the number of workers. I would reuse login sessions using storage trace, removes unnecessary wait, make sure tests are independent so they can run in parallel. Also, you can talk about using API for test data creation instead of UI wherever possible, and execute only the required test to suit such as smoke or regression. So these optimization can significantly reduce your overall test execution time. So talk about few cases for this question. Okay, so now let's see the next one. How do you decide what to automate and what test cases not to automate? So this is very important automation related questions. So we can prefer automating stable and business critical functionalities, regression and smoke test cases, repetitive manual tests, and scenarios that use multiple sets of test data. These are definitely automation candidates. And we usually avoid automating CAPTCHAs, OTP, third-party application-related cases, third-party payment flows, unstable features, or one-time test scenarios. So if a test case requires only one-time test execution, we won't automate these cases because they either change frequently or don't provide enough value. Okay, these are the cases we choose to automate and we choose not to automate. It's very important. So next question is, would you automate 100% of the application? Is it possible to automate 100% of the application? Actually, it's not practical to automate 100% of the application, right? So the goal is to automate the test cases that provide maximum business value while keeping maintenance effort under control. A balanced automation strategy is always better than trying to automate every single scenario. We just now saw about what cases we will not automate in a project. So 100% automation is definitely not feasible. Okay, so let's see the next question. How do you handle multiple matching web elements? So if multiple elements match a same locator, Playwright throws a strict mode violation because it expects a unique element. In this case, what we can do, I first make the locator more specific using locators like get by role, get by label, get by test ID, or filters like hash text. If selecting one particular element is intentional, we can use methods like first, last, or nth. So talk about these methods for this question. Okay, in this way you can handle multiple matching web elements. How do you locate a dynamic web element? This is also a very important interview question. For dynamic elements, we can prefer Playwright built-in locators, get by role label, get by label, get by placeholder, or get by test ID. If those aren't available, we can use filters like hash text or hash to create a stable locator. So the goal here is to always create reliable and maintainable locators. So talk about these locator strategies for handling dynamic web elements. So next question is, what if the ID changes every time? How will you locate elements in this case? So if the ID changes dynamically, we can avoid using it. Okay, instead I'll look for stable attributes like the role, label, placeholder, visible text, or data test ID. So if none of this is available, it's a combination of parent-child relationship or filters to uniquely identify the element. Okay, in this way we can handle this case. Next question is, what are the different wait mechanisms in Playwright? Playwright provides both auto waiting and explicit waits. So auto waiting automatically waits for elements before performing actions. For additional synchronization, we use methods like wait for selector, wait for load state, wait for URL, wait for response, and Playwright's expect assertions. So I generally avoid wait for timeout because it's a hard wait and can slow down our test execution. Okay, these are the different wait mechanisms in Playwright. So what is the default timeout in Playwright? By default, Playwright has a 30-second timeout for each test. If a test doesn't complete within 30 seconds, it fails with a timeout error. We can change this globally, the playwright.config.ts file, or override it for individual test cases whenever required. So by default, Playwright has a 30-second timeout for each test. Okay. Next question is, how do you handle pop-up events in Playwright? So in Playwright, we handle pop-up windows using the wait for event method. So first we start listening for the pop-up event, then we perform action that opens the pop-up like clicking a button or link. Once the pop-up opens, Playwright gives us control of the new page and we can continue our automation there. So this is the recommended way to handle new browser tabs or pop-up windows in Playwright. Okay. Next question is, how do you handle drop-downs in Playwright? It depends on the type of drop-down. If it is a standard HTML drop-down with a select tag, we can use select option method. We can select the option by value, visible text or index. If it's a custom drop-down, which is common in modern web applications, we can treat it like a normal web element. First click the drop-down and then click the required option using Playwright locators. So the approach depends on whether it is a standard drop-down or a custom drop-down. Okay. Next question is, the application contains an auto suggestion search box. As the user types IND, suggestion appear. Select India from the list. How do you automate this? So for an auto suggestion search box, I first enter the text IND into the search field. Once the suggestion appear, I locate the option with the text India and click on it. So I don't use fixed weights here. Instead, I rely on Playwright's auto weighting and use a stable locator to identify the required suggestion. This makes our test more reliable and less flaky. Okay. So next question is, how do you automate the file upload functionality for a PDF document? After uploading, how do you verify that the upload completed successfully? By ensuring the progress bar disappears and a success message is displayed. Okay. So to upload a file, we can use Playwright's set input files method. After the upload starts, we can wait for the progress bar to disappear instead of using a hard wait. Finally, we can verify the success message is displayed using Playwright assertions. Okay, so this approach keeps the test stable and avoids unnecessary waiting. Okay, in this way we can handle this case. How would you upload multiple files? So if the application supports multiple file uploads, we can use the set input files method and pass an array of file paths. So Playwright uploads all the files in a single operation here. After the upload is complete, we can verify that each file has been uploaded successfully by checking the file names or the success message displayed by the application. Okay, so let's see the next question. How do you run the tests in CI/CD pipeline? So in our project, we use Jenkins as our CI/CD tool. So whenever we push the latest code to Git repository, the Jenkins pipeline is triggered automatically. So we also have scheduled jobs that run every 24 hours to validate application's critical functionality. So please note, in the pipeline, we usually execute only smoke or business critical regression test cases. We don't execute all the cases. Okay. So after execution, Jenkins generates the HTML report. And if any test fails, we can review the report screenshots, logs, and trace viewer to identify the root cause. Okay. So why don't you run all the test cases in Jenkins? So running the entire automation suite for every code changes would increase the pipeline execution time and delay the feedback. That's why we execute only the business critical smoke or regression test cases in CI pipeline. The complete regression suite is usually executed as part of the scheduled test runs, overnight executions, or before any major releases. So if the interviewer asks, what do you include in smoke testing? You can say we include the most important critical business flows like registration, login, search, checkout, payment, or any other business critical flows from your project. Okay. Explain about your Git branching strategy. So in our project, we follow a simple feature branch strategy. We have two branches, feature branch and a master branch. Okay. Initially, we push after creation automation code, we push the code to the feature branch. And after code review, we create a PR and merge the changes to master branch and verify the logs in CI/CD pipeline. This is our simple Git branching strategy, simple and effective branching strategy. This is followed by most of the projects. Okay. Let's see the next question. Suppose a button is visible, but Playwright says element is not receiving pointer events. How do you resolve it? So if Playwright says the element is not receiving events, then usually another element is usually blocking it. So the blocking element could be a overlay, a loader, pop-up, or dialogues. So we can first wait until blocking element disappears. If required, we can scroll the button into view before clicking it. So after the button becomes clickable, we can perform the click action. Okay, in this way, we can handle this case. So I use force true only as the last option because it bypasses Playwright's safety check. Okay. Next question is, your application opens a new tab after clicking a link. How do you handle it? So if we clicking a link opens new tab, we can use context.waitForEvent method to capture it. So I start waiting for the new page before clicking the link. After the new tab opens, I store it in a new page object. Then I wait until the new page finish loading. So once the page is ready only, we can continue the automation scripts on the new tab. This approach ensures the new tab is captured correctly and the automation test remains stable. Okay. This is an important interview question. How do you execute the same test in multiple environments like QA, staging, production? So to execute the same test in different environments, we can store the different environment URLs in Playwright configuration file or .env file. Okay, so we configure the base URL as an environment variable, and during runtime we can pass the required environment value. Okay, so the test automatically uses the correct application URL here. We don't modify the test script when switching between QA, UAT or production. This approach will make our framework flexible and easy to maintain. Okay, so let's see some JavaScript related questions asked in many interviews. So why do we use async and await in Playwright? Okay, this is the first and very important question in an Playwright automation interview. Why do you use async and await in Playwright? So Playwright performs browser actions asynchronously. Okay, Playwright performs browser actions asynchronously. So methods like click, fill and go to will take some time to complete. So they return a promise. Okay, methods like click, fill and go to take some time to complete. So they return a promise. We can use async and await to make sure one action finishes before the next one starts. This keeps the test execution in the correct order and makes our automation more reliable. Okay, talk about Playwright browser actions are asynchronous. Methods like click, fill and go to will take some time to complete and they return a promise. We can use async and await to make sure one action finishes before the next one starts. Very important interview question in Playwright interview. See the next one. What happens if you don't use await? Okay, there's a follow-up question. If you don't use await, what happens? Playwright won't wait for the current action to complete. It immediately moves to the next statement. This can lead to a race conditions, flaky tests or failures because the application may not be ready when the next action is performed. Okay. So the next question, what is the difference between var, let and const? So the main difference is in their scope and reassignment. Var is function scoped and can be redeclared and reassigned. Let is block scoped and can be reassigned but not redeclared in the same scope. Const is also block scoped, but once it's assigned a value, it cannot be reassigned. In Playwright projects, I mostly use const, use let only when the value changes. Generally avoid using var. Okay. So the 50th question is, are Playwright actions synchronous or asynchronous? So Playwright actions are asynchronous. Operations like click, fill and go to return promises because they interact with the browser and take time to complete. That's why we use async and await to ensure each action completes before moving to the next one. So Playwright actions are asynchronous. So what is a promise in Playwright? A promise represents a task, okay, that will complete in the future. In Playwright, browser actions like clicking, typing or navigation takes time. So they return a promise instead of an immediate result. So we use await to wait for that promise to complete before executing the next statement. Okay, so promise represents a task that will complete in the future. Okay, so let's see the next question. Which one do you use in Playwright, var, let or const? So in Playwright, I mostly use const because objects like page, browser and locators don't need to be reassigned. Okay, I use let only when a variable's value changes during test execution. Generally avoid var because it can lead to unexpected behavior and it is not recommended in modern JavaScript. Okay. So what are arrow functions? How are they different from normal functions? Arrow functions are a shorter way of writing functions in JavaScript using the arrow syntax. Okay, they are more concise and are commonly used in modern JavaScript and TypeScript. In Playwright, you will often see arrow functions while writing test cases because they make the code cleaner and easier to read. Okay. So let's see the next question. Explain closures with an example. A closure is a JavaScript feature where an inner function can access variables from its outer function even after the outer function has finished executed. In simple terms, the inner function remembers the variable of the outer function. Closures are commonly used for data encapsulations, private variables, and creating reusable functions. So what is the lexical scope? Lexical scope means a function can access variables based on where it's defined, not where it's called. An inner function can access variables from its own scope as well as from its outer scope. This concept is the foundation of closures in JavaScript. Okay. What is the difference between map, filter, find and for each? So all four methods are used to work with arrays, but each has a different purpose. Map transforms every element and returns a new array, whereas filter returns only the elements that match a condition, and find returns the first matching element, and for each simply loops through each element to perform an action without returning a new array. Okay. What is hoisting? So it's JavaScript's behavior. Hoisting is JavaScript's behavior of moving variables and functions declarations to the top of their scope before execution. So only the declarations are hoisted, not the initial values here. Also, variables declared with let and const cannot be accessed before their declaration because they are in a temporal dead zone. Okay. So what is the difference between double equals and triple equal to? So answer is double equal compares only the values and performs automatic type conversions if needed. Triple equal to compares both the value and the data type without type conversion. So in modern JavaScript and Playwright projects, we always prefer triple equal to because it's more predictable and avoids unexpected results. Okay, so this is the difference. The next question is explain the JavaScript event loop. JavaScript is single threaded, so it executes only one task at a time. The event loop helps JavaScript handle asynchronous operations like API calls, file operations without blocking the main thread. Okay, once a asynchronous task is completed, its callback or promise is added to the queue. Okay, the event loop continuously checks whether the callback is empty, and when it is, it moves the next task from the queue to the call stack for execution. Okay. So explain destructuring. Destructuring is a JavaScript feature that lets us extract values from an object or an array and assign them directly to variables. So it makes the code cleaner, easier to read, and reduces the need to repeatedly access object properties. Destructuring is widely used in modern JavaScript and Playwright projects to write concise and maintainable code. Okay. So we have come to the end of the video. Know about the most common JavaScript coding programs asked in Playwright interviews. So reverse a string, palindrome, find duplicate elements in an array, remove duplicate elements. So go through these programs. These are commonly asked in many interviews, and it will be present in our interview prep booklets as well. Okay. So interview tips are definitely do more hands-on training. Don't just prepare with the booklets. Your hands-on training will really help you a lot in your interview. Do automation coding and programming coding. Go through API a lot. I have talked about 15 to 20 API questions in this 60. So please give more importance to API validations as well. It's not only about UI testing, it's about both UI and API. Okay. So before we end this video, I have something for those of you who are serious about building a career in automation testing. If you are currently working in manual and want to move into automation, or if you are already an automation tester and looking to switch to a better company or an SDET role, then our SDET 3-month SDET placement training program is designed especially for you. So in this program, you'll learn everything from the scratch. You don't have to have any coding knowledge or any testing knowledge for enrolling this program. You can be from a non-testing background as well. You can enroll to this program as well. We teach everything from the scratch, which includes skill sets on Playwright, Selenium, Java, JavaScripting, API testing and API automation, Postman, Rest Assured, Git CI/CD, framework development, framework optimization. So we have around 50 plus years in the industry, and we have helped 40 plus candidates in 2026 for experience placements alone. Okay, across India, US and UK, Canada. We have placed around 40 plus candidates in 2026. Okay, we have targeted 100 plus candidates this year. And throughout the program, you'll learn 200 plus coding programs, coding logic building, 1500 plus interview topics, so real-time framework concepts and everything you need to crack automation and SDET interviews. Okay, we usually take 4 batches in a year, and this is the 3rd batch, and we will be starting on August 3rd week. So dates will be informed later. Mostly it will be in August 3rd week or 4th week. So you will also receive one-on-one mentoring session, mock interviews, resume guidance and preparation, interview preparation booklets, frameworks, and continuous support from us throughout the program. So if you are serious about transforming your career and becoming a confident automation engineer or SDET engineer, feel free to call or WhatsApp to the number displayed in the screen. We will be happy to discuss the program and guide you further. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please do like, comment, share, subscribe our channel so you don't miss the upcoming interview preparation videos. See you in the next video. Happy learning and all the very best for your interviews.